you, seemed a fading dream along in the first days, has dissolved to an unreality now. It is gone from your mind with all its businesses and ambitions, its prosperities and disasters, its exaltations and despairs, its joys and griefs and cares and worries. They are no concern of yours any more. They have gone out of your life. They are a storm which has passed and left a deep calm behind. The people group themselves about the decks in their snowy white linen, and read, smoke, sew, play cards, talk, nap, and so on. In other ships the passengers are always ciphering about when they are going to arrive. Out in these seas it is rare, very rare, to hear that subject broached. In other ships there is always an eager rush to the bulletin board at noon to find out what the "run" has been. In these seas the bulletin seems to attract no interest. I have seen no one visit it. In 13 days I have visited it only once. Then I happened to notice the figures of the day's run. On that day there happened to be talk at dinner about the speed of modern ships. I was the only passenger present who knew this ship's gait. Necessarily, the Atlantic custom of betting on the ship's run is not a custom here. Nobody ever mentions it. I myself am wholly indifferent as to when we are going to "get in." If anyone else feels interested in the matter, he has not indicated it in my hearing. If I had my way, we should never get in at all. This sort of sea life is charged with an indestructible charm. There is no weariness, no fatigue, no worry, no responsibility, no work, no depression of spirits. There is nothing like this serenity, this comfort, this peace, this deep contentment, to be found anywhere on land. If I had my way, I would sail on forever and never go to live on the solid ground again. One of Kipling's ballads has delivered the aspect and sentiment of this bewitching sea correctly. The Injian Ocean sets and smiles, so soft, so bright, so bloomin' blue. There aren't a wave for miles and miles, except the jiggle from the screw. April 14. It turns out that the astronomical apprentice worked off a section of the Milky Way on me for the Magellan Clouds. A man of more experience in the business showed one of them to me last night. It was small and faint and delicate, and looked like the ghost of a bunch of white smoke left floating in the sky by an exploded bombshell. Wednesday, April 15. Mauritius. Arrived and anchored off Port Louis, 2 a.m. Rugged clusters of crags and peaks, green to their summits. From their bases to the sea a green plain with just tilt enough to it to make the water drain off. I believe it is in 56 degrees east and 22 degrees south, a hot tropical country. The green plain has an inviting look, has scattering dwellings nestling among the greenery. Scene of the sentimental adventure of Paul and Virginia. Island under French control, which means a community which depends upon quarantines, not sanitation, for its health. Thursday, April 16. Went ashore in the forenoon at Port Louis, a little town, but with the largest variety of nationalities and complexions we have encountered yet. French, English, Chinese, Arabs, Africans with wool, blacks with straight hair, East Indians, half-whites, quadroons, and great varieties in costumes and colors. Took the train for Curepipe at 1:30, 2 hours' run, gradually uphill. What a contrast, this frantic luxuriance of vegetation with the arid plains of India. These architecturally picturesque crags and knobs and miniature mountains with the monotony of the Indian dead levels. A native pointed out a handsome swarthy man of grave and dignified bearing, and said in an awed tone, "That is so-and-so. Has held office of one sort or another under this government for 37 years. He is known all over this whole island, and in the other countries of the world perhaps, who knows? One thing is certain, you can speak his name anywhere in this whole island, and you will find not one grown person that has not heard it. It is a wonderful thing to be so celebrated. Yet, look at him. It makes no change in him. He does not even seem to know it." Curepipe means pincushion or Pegtown, probably. 16 miles, 2 hours, by rail from Port Louis. At each end of every roof and on the apex of every dormer window a wooden peg 2 feet high stands up. In some cases its top is blunt, in others the peg is sharp and looks like a toothpick. The passion for this humble ornament is universal. Apparently there has been only one prominent event in the history of Mauritius, and that one didn't happen. I refer to the romantic sojourn of Paul and Virginia here. It was that story that made Mauritius known to the world, made the name familiar to everybody, the geographical position of it to nobody. A clergyman was asked to guess what was in a box on a table. It was a vellum fan painted with the shipwreck, and was one of Virginia's wedding gifts. April 18. This is the only country in the world where the stranger is not asked, "How do you like this place?" This is indeed a large distinction. Here the citizen does the talking about the country himself. The stranger is not asked to help. You get all sorts of information. From one citizen you gather the idea that Mauritius was made first, and then heaven, and that heaven was copied after Mauritius. Another one tells you that this is an exaggeration, that the 2 chief villages, Port Louis and Curepipe, fall short of heavenly perfection, that nobody lives in Port Louis except upon compulsion, and that Curepipe is the wettest and rainiest place in the world. An English citizen said, "In the early part of this century Mauritius was used by the French as a basis from which to operate against England's Indian merchantmen. So England captured the island and also the neighbor, Bourbon, to stop that annoyance. England gave Bourbon back. The government in London did not want any more possessions in the West Indies. If the government had had a better quality of geography in stock it would not have wasted Bourbon in that foolish way. A big war will temporarily shut up the Suez Canal some day, and the English ships will have to go to India around the Cape of Good Hope again. Then England will have to have Bourbon, and will take it. Mauritius was a Crown colony until 20 years ago, with a governor appointed by the Crown and assisted by a council appointed by himself. But Pope Hennessy came out as governor then, and he worked hard to get a part of the council made elective, and succeeded. So now the whole council is French, and in all ordinary matters of legislation they vote together and in the French interest, not the English. The English population is very slender. It has not votes enough to elect a legislator. Half a dozen rich French families elect the legislature. Pope Hennessy was an Irishman, a Catholic, a Home Ruler, MP, a hater of England and the English, a very troublesome person and a serious encumbrance at Westminster. So it was decided to send him out to govern unhealthy countries, in hope that something would happen to him. But nothing did. The first experiment was not merely a failure, it was more than a failure. He proved to be more of a disease himself than any he was sent to encounter. The next experiment was here. The dark scheme failed again. It was an off-season, and there was nothing but measles here at the time. Pope Hennessy's health was not affected. He worked with the French and for the French, and against the English, and he made the English very tired and the French very happy, and lived to have the joy of seeing the flag he served publicly hissed. His memory is held in worshipful reverence and affection by the French. It is a land of extraordinary quarantines. They quarantine a ship for anything or for nothing, quarantine her for 20 and even 30 days. They once quarantined a ship because her captain had had the smallpox when he was a boy. That and because he was English. The population is very small, small to insignificance. The majority is East Indian, then mongrels, then Negroes, descendants of the slaves of the French times, then French, then English. There was an American, but he is dead or mislaid. The mongrels are the result of all kinds of mixtures, black and white, mulatto and white, quadroon and white, octoroon and white, and so there is every shade of complexion, ebony, old mahogany, horse chestnut, sorrel, molasses candy, clouded amber, clear amber, old ivory white, new ivory white, fish belly white. This latter the leprous complexion frequent with the Anglo-Saxon long resident in tropical climates. You wouldn't expect a person to be proud of being a Mauritian, now would you? But it is so. The most of them have never been out of the island, and haven't read much or studied much, and they think the world consists of 3